Hello everyone and welcome. You might be wondering what's going on now. Well, I've been planning to do this for a while. I had received a few requests to explain in a way or another how does the pipe organ work. It might look a little bit mysterious with all those keyboards and those thingy buttons and the other buttons here and there and those buttons here and there and that thingy and all those things here. What it is all about, find out now.
Now, to start with, we might see that there are a number of keyboards which on an organ are called manuals, from the Latin manus, hand. And there is that thing there which is called a pedal board, from the Latin pes, foot, which you play with your feet. Now, each one of these manuals will have its own set of, shall we call them, colors, musical colors, and they are all very specific. So let's have a look at what we have here. Looking at the stop list, we've got the great. It's called the great manual, and in this case is this one on this organ. And then we get a choir manual, which is more indicated for lighter accompaniments for choirs. And it is this bottom manual here. And then moving on to the other side, we get a swell manual, which here is the top one. Now, why is it called swell? Well, because we can make the sound swell. How? Through that pedal. It's called the swell pedal. And we are going to see how it works in a moment, just the time to get inside the organ. So let's have a very little trek. I am now inside the organ on its very top level. You can probably see the ceiling up. You can imagine how high up we are. You can see the stained glass window up there. Had to go through a pretty steep set of steps. So what do we have here? What is all this thing? Ooh. What is that? Well, this is why that manual is called swell. That's because we have got these Venetian blinds which inside hide many pipes. Let's open a little door here, shall we? Let's open the door. Right, and let's switch a light on. Oops. Oh, now we can see much better. Okay, there is a bucket with some water for humidification. And you can see that there are plenty of pipes behind here. Some of them are actually quite huge. Yeah, and this is called the swell because by the, oh my goodness, by the opening and closing of these Venetian blinds operated by that pedal underneath, you can make the sound softer and louder. Now let's go back down. Yeah, that's where I've got to go. I'm gonna turn off the phone now. I've only got a pair of hands and I'm gonna need both to go down. And we're out again. So we've now seen the function of that pedal that can just open and close. You can hear the noise of the box closing. I'm doing it loudly intentionally now, but you can do it silently as well. So what's left? The pedal. And those are all the sounds of our sound palette that will be affecting what you do with your feet. Right, so how does the whole thing work?
Well, as you can imagine, it's a quite complicated mechanism because there is so much going on. So to start with, how does the sound come out? Well, it's the pipes. These ones that you see here in the front are called the façade, from the French, from the face. And these pipes only represent a small fraction of all the pipes inside. You've seen a moment ago how many there were inside the Swell box. It's a big box, you see, you remember. And I've only shown you 1/2 of it. So there were twice as many on the other side. So we've got the pipes, yeah? And they receive air. Golly, where does the air come from? Do we have slaves or child laborers who will just pump some big bellows and no, that belongs to the past, thankfully. Also because it's rather inefficient, if you ask me.
Thanks to some incredible technological advancements, we can now have what we call an electric blower. So what is it? Let's try to open it. Oh goodness. Yeah, that's an engine that will blow the air inside the pipes. Now, how and where? Let's first close it. Right, through this big thing that goes up and up inside the organ, and will make sure that all the pipes are supplied with enough air. This little red rope is a very ingenious mechanism that makes the engine decide how much air and how much power to pump. Because of course not all pipes are created equal. If you look at those huge ones, those are 16-foot pipes. And those require quite an amount of air. But some of the tiny ones you've seen before, they don't require as much. So the more air is being used, and the more the engine, the blower, will put air through.
So, how is it that the whole thing works? How do we decide which pipes get the air? I mean, how can I make that pipe speak instead of that one or that one? Well, this is what those are for, the stops. Now, the original word in Italian would have been registro, and registro translates literally in English register, but the old Italian meaning is different. It means a long piece of wood. What does a long piece of wood have to do with all of this? Let's see that in a second.
We are now in the choir division, which is, if you just try to look what's down here behind those pipes, it's just above the console from where I play. As you see, if you observe, those pipes are all arranged according to kind. They are all in ranks according to their specific shape. And it all makes sense. They're all arranged in a very specific way, very precise. And that is because they all sit underneath on what is called a wind chest, which is pretty much a hollow piece of wood, a box, where the air comes in pressurized. Now, those things you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are actually the levers for the stops with electromagnets. Okay, I cannot move them by hand now, but if I drew a stop, that would come that way. And it would move a piece of wood just inside the wind chest, which would allow now this rank of pipes here to receive air if I press the key. And so will the next one and the next one and the next one. So depending on which of those I pulled from downstairs, a whole rank of pipes would be allowed to receive air or not. And at that point, it depends on which key I press. The notes would play or not, because they're all arranged vertically. So we've got one note here, and we've got another note here, and another note here, and another note here. So I press a key, and exactly those pipes that have been allowed by here will be able to speak, or to sing if you rather prefer. We are still inside the organ. You might be wondering now, hang on, but the keyboards, where I play my notes with my hands, are a lot smaller than the rest of the organ. So how can a key make some pipes play which are very much far away? Well, this makes it possible. This is what we call a tracker action organ. And what you're actually looking at now are all the trackers. All of these are pieces of wood. It's a very complicated system that allows the keyboard, by pulling it from down there, all of these go all the way down to the keyboards and the pedals, by just pulling these to actually send the pull somewhere else, up there, down there, and all the way up. And we are all surrounded by all of these marvels of technology, which is actually quite ancient technology, which still works very well today. Let's have a look at the swell division. Starting from the bottom, we've got an open diapason, a chimney flute, salitional, voix celeste, principal, valve flute, mixture, oboe, double trumpet, trumpet, clarion, tremulant. What's all this? Well, I'm gonna cut it short for you, otherwise I'm gonna bore you to death. So those numbers that you see there, the 8, the 4, the 2, they indicate the length in feet of the longest pipe of that rank. And that in turn indicates the octave at which that will play. So to make life simpler, I'm going to use a very interesting piece of technology which I've stored just here. A very good old-fashioned rickety pencil. Now what's the pencil for? Just for making my life easier. I'm gonna stick the pencil here on the C, so I won't have to do anything else. So, which one shall we pull? Open diapason. This is the sound it makes. That's an 8-foot sound for that note. Let's go for the 4-foot principal. It's higher by an octave. Let's go with the valve flute. We can combine them, or we can have the chimney flute 8. That will sound at the same pitch as that, but a different sound. And the salitional is going to be even different, a lot softer and a little bit more nasal. But say if we combined this with this, we get a completely different picture. Now we also got a beating stop. Complicated to explain why it beats, but if we have this and that, the sound undulates, it beats in technical terms. So how does it do that effect? Listen very carefully to the pitch. It's not quite the same pitch, is it? It's ever so slightly different between those two. And that's why, together, they make this sound. It's a little bit like a much simpler version of a honky-tonk. So we might want to explore what the pedal has got to offer. So we see an awful lot of 16, I mean an awful lot. We've only got 3, but that's more than plenty. And then we get an 8 and a 4, and that's because the pedal tends to play the low notes, but it doesn't only. So for instance, if I drew the open diapason here and I played the very bottom note with my foot, that would be that big pipe there, that one, all the way up, and that would be a 16-foot note. So in the same way, if I played that again, but I had the octave on, I would get that. If I had that on, it would make a completely different sound. But again, that's not a very low sound, is it? If I went up the top end, that's quite a high sound if you ask me. Likewise, we get lots of other stops. For the other manuals, this is for the choir and for the grate. You might have noticed by now that there are some stops which have got Roman numerals. Sharp mixture 3, sesquialtera 2, mixture 4. And again we get a mixture 4 here. And a mixture 5 here, what does it stand for? Well, the Roman numerals indicate how many ranks of pipes belong to that stop. So if I pulled this on the swell, this would make 5 pipes play at the same time. Quite an interesting sound. Likewise, on the pedal, 4 ranks for the bottom note, 4 pipes. Same for the choir, the sharp mixture. As the name indicates, it's quite sharp. It's higher than the other two we've heard on so far, and this one is, whoa, yeah, quite annoying if we have it on its own. Likewise, we've got different combinations of different colors. We've got trumpets. Or we can have the brightness of diapason's principal 15th and mixture. Or even the much brighter mixture with the whole, as we call it, chorus in the choir. And if you compare it to the chorus on the grate, it's a little bit different, isn't it? Now we get a little bit of magic. That's where the complicated stuff can happen. We can combine sounds from the swell, the pedal, the choir and the grate together, and with quite a degree of selection. So how do we do that? What does it mean? I'm going to go with an example. So let's pull the choir to grate only. There is no other stops pulled in the grate. There's no other stops pulled in the whole organ, so it won't make a sound. Yeah? Now I'm going to pull a random stop here, the Nasom flute 4, which belongs here. So it's not supposed to make a sound here, but yeah, you might have noticed that it was moving the keys just underneath. And in the same way, I can do the same with the swell, with the manual above. So I can have a ghost keyboard. And I can move both of them. And I can combine stops. I might want, say, the double trumpet here. And I might want it combined with the trumpet here, which has got its own sound. And I might want to have some weird stop from the choir here, which is strange now. It's going to sound at the wrong pitch. So this plus, and we are going to put them together. Choir to grate, swell to grate. Play on the grate. Very strange combination. You can mix and match and combine all the stops to create lots of different musical colors.
Of course, all of these might sound rather confusing at the beginning. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, how do you actually learn to do all of that? Well, it takes time. Takes an awful lot of time and many hours spent not only practicing at the instrument, but also learning academically what different organs sound like. Now, this is a British organ, it's an English organ, which has been built in 1996 with a kind of eclectic neoclassical idea in mind. So you can play quite a lot of repertoire, and it's got a variety of sounds that allow you to play music of different eras, and it's got a limited number of stops because of the location and the space restrictions and everything. But you might find much smaller organs and much bigger. There are organs that have, say, 10 stops. I mean, only 10 of those. There are other organs that have got 20, 30. This one has got 35. There are organs which have got 100, 200, 300 of those. But all the stops follow a rather rigorous logic and arrangement, also from a positional point of view. And we have stops from the French school, from the Italian school, from the Spanish school, from the British, from the German, from the Dutch, and also from the American school, and the list could go on. A good organist is supposed to know pretty much what all of those stops sound like. And that's, a few hundred different kinds of sounds you've got to know, and you've got to acquire a taste on how to combine them together, also according to what a composer had in mind. So when, say, random composer César Franck asks you for a full organ, you would have to expect a very specific kind of sound. But when Bach or Buxtehude ask for a big and grand sound, in their own way, of course, because they would never have specified it, by the way, you would have to expect something different. So depending on what the instrument you have at hand has got to offer, you've got to create something as similar as possible to the original according to what you have. It's a little bit like you are going to a friend's house to cook dinner, and then you start to open randomly the drawers in the kitchen to see what they have. And then you've got to decide, okay, I want to do spaghetti alla carbonara. How do I make something that tastes like that with the ingredients I've got? That's the principle. Now, from a much more practical point of view, there are a few problems. I might imagine that a few of you are pianists. You play the piano. So you know how it more or less works. The left hand plays the bass, a few chords, it might be jumping around a little bit, bass and chord, bass and chord. The left hand will play the melody, some other chords and things. But on the organ, it all changes. So sometimes you've got the pedals, your feet, playing something that is in the middle of left and right. And you've got your left playing the bass and the right playing the melody. More often, you've got the feet playing the bass, the left hand playing something that's in the middle, which is definitely not the bass, and the right hand doing melody and other things. Often you find three completely different lines going on at the same time. The right hand representing, I don't know, a violin or an oboe or a flute, and the left hand may be representing a bassoon or a viola or some other instrument, and your feet representing a cello or a double bass or something like that, or even a trombone. And that would be called a trio. And all the three are like three different people playing some music together, like ensemble music, like a group. And you would have to do all of that on your own by making sure that every single line will phrase musically, will sound nicely, and that's not easy. And they will have to sound expressive at the same time. But you've got to consider one small little detail.
You know how a piano is expressive, right? You push harder on the keys and the sound is bigger. You go easier and the sound is softer. But on the organ, let's take two random stops on the grade, open diapason and principal, which is quite the foundation of the organ sound. Okay, now I'm going really easy, really soft. Now I'm gonna go really hard. The only difference is the clock that you heard when I went there heavily. The sound is always the same. The only way you can actually intervene a little bit is in the emission and the release of it. So you can go a little bit softer. or a bit harder. You might have heard something at the attack and at the end of the sound, which was a little bit different. So to get you a little bit of this diversity, I'm going to play a trio, the beginning of it, by Johann Sebastian Bach. It's the first movement of the Sonata number 2 in C minor, where the left hand is gonna be playing on the swell, the right hand is gonna be playing on the great, and the feet, for this I've got to sit down actually, are going to be playing on this. Right, and all of this, all together, it's gonna sound like this. And so forth. So you get a little bit of a taste of what the organ can do. There are so many things you can do with the instrument, and the only limitations are, well, physical, what you can do with your limbs, what your mind can do, and of course what the instrument can give you. And this will conclude our little tour today. I hope you learned something, you had a good time, and I hope this helped you to pass a little bit of time, especially during these very complicated times of coronavirus pandemic. Stay safe, everyone.